Friday here with just a couple of listener questions. We've gone a little longer than we thought, but we did get some listener questions. We do have some time maybe for a call or two and or some texts. So if you want to get in, 949-542-6241, we'll try and get to you. We do have a question on Twitter, though, John. There is a question from our good friend Sam Anger, and he is across the pond in the UK. He says, "Hey lads," so you can tell he's from the UK. Hey lads. Sorry, I lost it here. One sec. Hey lads, hope you're doing well. Question for Anthony. Well, let's start with yours because he has one for me and one for you. Let's start with yours, John. Question for John. Do you think William Jackson III is struggling with Austin's system? If so, do you think it's a lull?
Perhaps, I guess. I don't think Austin's scheme directly impacts the way Jackson has been suspect to double moves that he has. I think that's kind of been an issue going back to last year with him, specifically against T.Y. Hilton. That's like the most glaring example. But I think what a lot of people wanted to see from him is, following that team's best receiver. And I'm not sure that's a great idea in the sense that guys are lining up a lot more in the slot. And I don't think that he has the hips to really handle shifty guys in the slot. So maybe, perhaps, but I just think that Jackson was kind of going through the motions early on in the season. But the past 3 or 4 games, he's been playing very good, almost to the level that he was at last year. So I think he was just kind of in a rough patch against very good competition, but I think he's coming back. And I don't think it has a lot to do with what Austin is doing on as the play caller.
Yeah, I agree. And I think, and you might have touched on this a little bit here, but, when the Bengals drafted Jackson, it was under Gunther, and Gunther likes those press man, leave a guy out on the island type of thing. And, that's just not too much of that's not so much what Austin is preaching. We've got a call on the line here, and we'll get to a question here. So hang tight one sec, John. Hey, it's the Orange and Black Insider. Who's this?
Aaron from Cincinnati.
Aaron?
Yeah, Aaron.
Hey, how you doing, bud?
Doing all right, man. Thanks for asking. I just had a question. I've been thinking about this for quite some time, even more so lately with our defense playing. I'm not really sure about while I love guys like Geno Atkins and Carlos Dunlap and whatnot, I think the league is kind of evolving in a way where it's really hard to have impact players at defensive tackle position. And it just, it makes me feel sometimes like with all the rules with hitting the quarterback and how mobile they're getting and how fast they're getting rid of the ball, I just feel like a lot of our impact players on defense that are on the defensive line, I just don't know how sustainable that's going to be going forward with the league going like it is right now. And I was just seeing what you guys thought about that or had any thoughts on it.
That's a great question, and there's a lot of different caveats to that, and John and I will answer that off the air. But before we get you out of here, Aaron, I don't know if you were here earlier in the show when we did a question of the night in terms of Brandon LaFell. I mean, do you as a fan now kind of say, the Bengals should have hung on to him, or is it kind of like, hey, you know what? Doesn't really matter. They're going to get healthy, and they're not missing him too much. They're still 5-3.
As far as the wide receivers go?
Yeah, just, there's injuries to the wide receiver group, injuries to tight end, and then there's ineffectiveness towards the back end of the wide receiver group. So, maybe having a LaFell in your back pocket to lean on during, when there's a little bit of lead time. That's kind of where we were going with that question.
Hindsight 2020. I think that it was the right move right at the time because you want to give those young, they'll never develop if they never get the chance. Just sucks that our number 1 draft pick is always injured. That's just like a crap blow right there. But in hindsight, you can say maybe, but at the time, I think they made the right move.
Yeah.
I don't know. I just think that you gotta be better at evaluating the talent that you have at that depth because we know that Cody Core we know we had those guys because we've had them for multiple years. So if there was a time to go and get somebody we felt could contribute a little bit more on the actual catching the ball part of football, we definitely should have did that. I feel like that's just a little bit of a bad foresight on the coaching to have, if you ask me. But I don't know, just saying. But thank you guys very much. Got my son here. So I'm ready to let you go.
Awesome. Well, we hope that you and your son had a good Halloween. We'll answer your question off the air. Thanks for calling in. Don't be a stranger, buddy.
Absolutely. Thank you very much.
All right. I thought that's a really interesting question, John, because the rules against hitting a quarterback now, that's interesting. Also, pass-happy league, and a lot of teams are getting the ball out so quickly that it's almost like the emphasis is on able linebackers and defensive backs. I think there's always going to be use for a Geno Atkins guy, the smaller, quicker guy that can penetrate and get after the quarterback. But maybe the Andrew Billings guys, the big run stuffer, whatever, are becoming a little passe. What did you make of that question from caller Aaron there?
Yeah, there's no doubt that the modern game of football is trying to attack the modern Bengals linebacker, which is slow and lethargic and isn't able to cover. So, yeah, those guys are obviously going to be liabilities. But, I mean, pressure is king, and Geno Atkins will always a three technique who can pressure up the middle and collapse the pocket from the inside. That'll always have value. But like you said, the average time to throw is dropping under 2.5 seconds. That's why he's having such a phenomenal season with Indianapolis, is that he's mitigating offensive line issues by getting the ball out quickly. And that's kind of
Dalton is too.
Yeah, Dalton has always done that, and that's always mitigated pressures from his poor center play. But yeah, I think that it comes to a philosophical question of, it's better to have dominant cover guys who can cover for those first couple seconds, or dominant pass rushers who can collapse the pocket better. Obviously, if you have both, you'll be fine. But it's almost like it's leaning towards better cover guys over better rushers. But I mean, guys like Geno Atkins, Carlos Dunlap, they'll always have value because they are good players, and they'll be able to win one-on-one blocks. And especially with the fact that college game is transitioning from developing better pass rushers over better offensive linemen. Not many programs are developing offensive linemen who are able to come into the league better, or at a high level. So I do think that quick cover guys are becoming more and more valuable, but pass rushers will always still have that value that they have.
Yeah. And that goes back a little bit to the old school mindset of this franchise and Marvin Lewis. They're still kind of, they don't mix up a lot of looks up front. They still kind of do that old school base 4-3 defense. Yes, a lot of the times they trot out nickel as their base defense, but a lot of teams in the league do the 3-man front with a lot of different blitzing linebackers and all that kind of stuff, and different edge players to try and create different mismatches up front. And the Bengals don't really do that on their end. But I think that there is still some value for a Josh Tupou, an Andrew Billings in the AFC North, because the Steelers still like to run the ball a lot. James Conner, you can tell. I mean, Le'Veon Bell is amazing, but James Conner has like 4 100-yard rushing games this year. So, teams are still getting backs that that they want to use. Yes, there's going to be more passing, and there is more passing, but the AFC North teams, they all play outdoors. And as this time of year rolls around, weather gets crappy and everybody plays outdoors, and you're going to need you're going to need to lean on the running game a little bit more probably than you did throughout. So having some of those big defensive tackles you need, but I do agree that some of those, that's why A. Billings fell the way he did, right? I mean, 5+ years ago, that's a first-round pick. That's a first-round guy, right? But the league going the way it is, it's like, well, he can only play 1 or 2 downs, and that's it. Where's the value in that? If you're going to get a first-round guy, you want a guy that can play often. So, interesting point. I thought that's an interesting question there from our listener. We've got a couple more questions queued up, and we'll get out of here, John. A bunch of people asked us this, including Sam Anger, and we'll get to the rest of his tweet in a minute. But I saw it was Sam Anger asked us this. I saw Cincy fan Jungle City in the live YouTube chat asked us this, along with a lot of other people. Now that we're at the midway point, now that we've seen what we've seen, and the Bengals are 5-3, How do you see the rest of it playing out, and do they make the playoffs? What's your prediction here? Now, if you need some help, I'll pull up the schedule because we do know that the Bengals play the Saints next week, which is, yes, it's at home, and yes, it's outdoors, which falls into their favor, but it's one of the best quarterbacks to ever play the game in Drew Brees, and he's going up against a defense that is a sieve at this point. So we look here. You have the Saints, pretty tough stretch of games coming up here in the next 5 weeks. You have the Saints at home. You go to Baltimore. You host the Browns. You host the Broncos, and then you are at the Chargers. So those are the next 5 games, and then you got the Raiders, the Browns again, and then the Steelers to end the season. So again, if you kind of want to break the schedule down in chunks, these next 5 games are pretty critical, especially since they're all, with the exception of one, they're all AFC games, and 2 of them are divisional. So that's kind of how the rest of the schedule plays out. Your thoughts?
So I just literally counted on both hands the wins and losses. I kind of just on logic, 3 wins, 5 losses. Obviously, crazy stuff happens all the time in the NFL, but I was just going off of, Bengals typically do well against the Ravens, but I think that this Ravens team is going to have bad intentions based off of how last game went. I think I think this is the year that they go back to splitting Cleveland just because of the coaching change might revitalize, what they have going on there. And plus, I'm honestly scared of Baker Mayfield now. Saints, Chargers, Steelers, those are probably all losses because of obviously Drew Brees and Phillip Rivers are great quarterbacks that can, destroy this defense. And at Pittsburgh week 17, there'll be a lot of implications on that. It might get flexed to primetime. We don't know, but I'm going to say, Broncos, Raiders, I think those are basically pencil in the wins at this point and splitting the Browns. So I'm going to say floor is 8 wins right now. And I would say best case is probably 10, and that's what they're going to need to get into the playoffs. So I guess the middle ground there is 9 wins. So I'm going to say, 8 or 9, and I'm going to say they just miss it. But that's going off of just basically like what the teams are on paper, what the quarterbacks are on paper, what the team is right now. Unless they show things that are drastically different, more consistency on offense, just a better overall philosophy on defense, I don't think they're going to win 1 or 2 of the games that they need to win, and that's why they'll probably fall 1 or 2 games short.
Yeah, I could totally see how you see them going 3-5 because you look at it, they have terrible success against the Steelers. I agree with you that I think this could be a year where they split with the Browns. I'm not as high on Baker Mayfield as you are, but I think that the Browns defense is scrappy. And weather gets bad. Who knows what's going to happen in those 2 games? I think they could split that. I think Denver should be a win. I think they can take Baltimore again. I mean, they have good success against Baltimore. So I see like 4 wins.
Yeah,
and there might be one that they drop where you're like, dude, really? But they also get one, maybe at Chargers, maybe it's the Ravens, maybe it's the Steelers. I see 9 wins, and I see that Week 17 game probably meaning something.
For sure.
And I think, given what's transpired and however the outcome is, I do think if it's 9-7 and the Bengals are fighting for their playoff lives in Pittsburgh, and the Steelers are doing the same, I don't like those odds. But I do see that being the case. I think the Bengals probably go into that week with 9 wins and maybe needing to win to get in or what have you. So I will say 9-7 at this point, maybe barely missing the playoffs, potentially a wild card because the conference is kind of weak. But I see probably four wins in here. I hope actually it's the one against, at least one of them is against the Chargers because I'm going to that game. So I would like to see them win. But I say 4 wins, 9-7. They'll sniff the playoffs, maybe, especially if that last game comes down to it. Especially if it gets flexed into prime time. Oh boy. So that's where I'm at. We've got a lot of questions. We got a lot of questions on that, and we'll see. James Napke says NBC will flex the final game against the Steelers. Bengals will get slaughtered. They'll still squeak in the playoffs, but lose a wild card game against the Steelers again. Wow. Poly positive right there.
But it's so freaking likely, though.
It totally is. It totally is. It totally is. I mean, that's yeah. But we've said this before in this program, John. Those are the teams that you need to beat in order to do anything in the league. You got to beat the Steelers. You got to beat the Chiefs. You got to beat the Patriots. I mean, if you ever want to be a championship team, those are the teams that you need to beat. And hopefully, this feast or famine team becomes a little more feast than famine over the next stretch of the 8 games. And hopefully, they work out a lot of stuff over the bye week. One more question, and you mentioned it a little bit, John, but one more question we're getting a lot of in the live YouTube chat and everything is about Hue Jackson. Hue Jackson was just, for those who have been living under a rock, Hue Jackson was just let go as the Cleveland head coach. Obviously has major ties to Marvin Lewis and the Cincinnati Bengals. One of the most successful offenses the Bengals franchise has ever seen was under Hue Jackson in 2015. Unfortunately, Andy Dalton got hurt that year. We all know how that season ended. And so on and so forth. We did see a lot of creativity that year out of the offense, which was kind of cool. But you look at it and he's out there. It's funny. I think he's going on First Take on Friday morning. So he goes from being fired on Monday morning to going to, I think Adam Schefter said he's fired Monday morning and now he's going to go on ESPN Friday morning. But look, he's not going to be a guy to replace Bill Lazor. Bill Lazor's done some good things this year. If you're looking at an offensive coordinator, I think most people would say, position assistant, offensive quality control. I don't know, some position for him. Is there a fit for him here? Or is it just like, dude, let's move on. Let's, Marv, love you, Hugh, but, let's just move on. Or could he bring some value as a position coach, as an assistant, that sort of thing?
If he steps into Hamilton County, I'm throwing hands. He's a perpetual liar out of the Bengals organization. Just today, he said, I wanted Wentz, Watson, and Mahomes. Browns would have been winning had we had done it my way year 1. The dude is a liar. The dude, I can't stand him. And Hard Knocks really validated all my freaking hatred for this man. Keep him away. All right, the dude was 3-36-1 as the Browns head coach. And I know people were talking about him bringing us as a consultant or as an assistant. The guy started off after he got fired from the Ravens, he started as a secondary assistant. Then he worked his way up to the offensive coordinator. And then had he had stayed, he was going to be the next head coach of this team. So I don't get how just him being here as a low level responsibility guy is not going to have an impact on the future. I think that he has a legit relationship with Mike Brown, and if he gets back into the organization, he becomes the primary candidate to take over for the team as soon as Marvin Lewis leaves, and that is the exact opposite of what I want to happen if Marvin Lewis ever decides to give it up. Keep him away. Some other team just pick him up or hire him as a janitor or whatever. I don't want him to be part of here at all, and I could not say that enough.
That is probably the most emotionally charged John Sheeran I've ever seen on this program, and it's about Hue Jackson of all things. God knows how dysfunctional they are, and the thing they can hang their hat on the most is the Kevin Costner movie at this point from a couple of years ago. That's the most positive thing they've got going for them. So I'm going to say this about Hue Jackson. I agree he does not need to be with the Bengals. There's not really a place for him at this point anyway. But I will say this, and this is a prediction, and it may be a lazy prediction, and it may be a geographically based prediction, but I believe that Hue Jackson will return to USC in some capacity, whether it's an offensive coordinator, head coach, that sort of thing. Clay Helton there is on the hot seat. T. Martin, who college football fans probably remember him, was an outstanding quarterback at Tennessee. He is the offensive coordinator and has come under major scrutiny. USC is in transition, but they're also underachieving this year. So I think Hue Jackson, where he was there with Carson Palmer, I think Hue Jackson probably returns there in some capacity, offensive coordinator, head coach, something, or somewhere in the Pac-12 in general. I just think he's going to go to the college level if he wants to continue coaching. I think that's where he's going to go. But, I don't. There's not a place for him here. There's not a place for him in Cincinnati, and Maybe Marvin will get creative and cute with finding something for him, but I don't see it, and I don't see a need for it. Unless he wants to divulge all of the Browns' secrets this year and their game plans to the Bengals, then so be it. But I don't see that happening. Thanks for all of the questions and everything, guys. Sorry we couldn't take many calls this week. We kind of ran up against it and got a little swamped here and ran a little long, but. We appreciate you joining us on this bye week. We appreciate your questions. Get this show on all of the platforms we have mentioned: iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, Art19, CincyJungle.com, YouTube. Get the show. Listen to it. We appreciate it. And tailgate with it. And we'll see you next time. This is the Orange and Black Insider. For John Sheeran, I'm Anthony Cosenza. See you next episode.